Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is the Question Guy podcast. I'm here with Shirley, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. Shirley, you're going to introduce yourself. Introduce yourself.
I'm Shirley Billigmeyer. It's
Shirley,
Billigmeyer.
I appreciate you jumping on the call. Now, in our, offline, when we talked the first time, you mentioned something that is so intrinsic to who we are as people, yet we tend to ignore it. And the words that I'm using now are the words that you used, and that's called our gut brain. And so we recognize that when things happen to us, first time I ever, did a public speaking thing, guess who was talking to me? My gut. Every time I go in to make a new relationship, guess what's talking to me? My gut. My gut tells me so much. And I tend to want to ignore it, but it talks so loud. But you help people understand how to get in touch with their gut brain. So let's start the conversation. What in the world is a gut brain?
The gut brain is everything you just described. And would you believe that there are 9 messages to one, from the gut to the head versus the head to the gut? So what you're saying, and that gut is speaking to us all the time, 9 messages to one. And sometimes it's a whisper, sometimes it screams. And some people may know it as, oh, I had butterflies in my stomach, or I just kind of knew, or it's like, where did that wisdom come from? The gut brain, and many people have heard the term wisdom of the body. There is a ton of wisdom in your gut brain. You feel it. You know there's something there. You're aware of it. There's a message that's coming up. And all of those messages we really need to listen to.
Hmm. So this had to start somewhere. And so I know if my memory serves correctly, it was first something was going on with some teenagers because uh, teenagers are so impacted by social media that their eating habits are now probably problematic. But you were feeding your baby? Yeah, your 2-year-old?
Well, the way I figured this out, because when I was in high school and I was a cheerleader, and of course you're out there and people are looking at you, and I always wanted to be a little thinner, like maybe 10, 15 pounds. And I could figure out how to lose the weight. You go on this program and then you think, okay, it's done. And I think, like, my achievement, I could figure out, okay, you need to do this to get an A, you need to do this. But with eating, it was so different. I'd lose the weight. I think, okay, now it's over. No, then it creeps back on again. And you just go, what is it with this eating? Every time you think you got a handle on it, it starts coming back. And then your mind gets more saturated with it. And I was always looking for going beyond losing the weight, because it was that angst. It was that angst. And what I realized later, that angst was within my gut brain. And that angst carried me through college. It was still there, trying to figure out how to keep this weight in check, how to keep it down. And that angst then carried me into when I went teaching. And I would watch my students, and I thought, what is this all about? I am going to figure this out once and for all, because it seemed like everybody was spending so much time and energy thinking about what they were eating, what they weren't eating, and what they should be eating, and why did they eat so much, and why isn't their body size the way they want it to be? And it went on and on and on. I thought, oh my word, there's so much more to life. Eating was meant to give us energy. It was not meant to drain our energy. Something is really off. And it wasn't until I had my first child. So I taught school for 6 years, then I was married, and my infant. And there was the aha moment. I'm watching my infant, and she is knowing very strong when she wants to start eating. She doesn't even have words yet. She cries. She lets me know. And also, what I learned was she had an incredible stop. She didn't care how big I was. She didn't care what degree I had. She didn't care about her diaper size. She wanted to stop eating. I went, oh my word, there's the boundary, the eating boundaries, the start and the stop of eating. But even beyond that, in what I discovered was while I was watching her eat, she was very clear of what she liked the taste of, what she didn't like the taste of. And as I did my research, I realized we are born with over 10,000 taste buds, unique to each one of us. And when you think about it, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because when you think about infants, we're a unique system. They know what they want. They know what they don't want. They know when to start eating. They know when to stop eating. All of the information is given to us at birth. We just interfered with it and we stopped listening.
Well, it sounds so natural, but as we grow, I'm going to use myself and my daughter. So my daughter is very picky as an eater. Now, she's not heavily influenced by social media, thank goodness. And myself and my wife, so we kind of generally eat rather healthy foods, but we've yet to really encourage her. Well, enforce the fact that she should be eating more fruits and vegetables because they're just not, I guess, enjoyable to eat. But for an adult, especially for myself who is an exercise enthusiast, I crave, a really good apple or a pear or, a really good salad. So how do we learn to do this the right way?
By not having it out of order in the first place,
Okay.
because the body naturally wants that balance and it will crave. So, but what happens is we put um, judgment on things. Oh, this is good for you. This is bad for you. You should eat this. You shouldn't eat that. We put so much judgment on the food that the child no longer has that right to really feel how the food feels to them because the child will crave variety. In fact, there was a study done by Leanne Birch, and she was studying 5-year-olds. And when she did, she had two groups. One group was where the parents didn't say anything to them about what to eat or what not to eat. What was good, what was healthy, what was a treat. There was no labels on any of the food. They just had the food out there. You choose. The treat wasn't at the end. It wasn't even called a treat. It was called chocolate, or it was all on the plate. There was no judgment. That was one group. The other group was a set of parents who really felt like, well, I really need to teach my child healthy eating. They need to have their vegetables. They need to have their fruit. They need all of this. So there was one group with no judgment, one group with tons of judgment. So what they did with these children, they fed all the children lunch. Then they put them into a room where there was all kinds of food in this room, from snacks to whatever it was going to be. It might be chips, it might be chocolate, it might be apples, it might be fruit, and then there were toys. What was fascinating was very clear. The children who were restricted or had judgment on their food went to the food that was not healthy because they thought they better get it while they can, because when they get home, they can't have it. The children had no judgment. They weren't hungry. They didn't need to eat. They went and played with the toys. What it comes down to, and this is the term I will use a lot, is you can't want a should. I take off the labels so you can want a should. That's what is key when I would work with people, because that judgment interferes with their natural feeling. Because in your gut, there's your identity. You need to choose what you want in order to feel how that food feels to you. And it's important that you can feel that without the judgment, because with your identity of something that sustains your life, you need total and complete choice so you can truly feel how the food feels to you. That's health at a deeper level. And it's a natural state to have a blend of food. And then people say, well, what about all these processed food? And what starts to happen, because we have all those taste buds, kids start wanting a strawberry that tastes like a strawberry if they're used to a taste, but something that doesn't taste good. So you really end up getting food at a really what you would call a core level of taste, because that's what drives the child. They want a variety of good tasting food that feels good to them. But because there's so much judgment and there's so many rules on the eating, the kids will always go to, and this is what parents will say, but if I let them eat chocolate, that's all they're going to eat for the rest of their life. And I've worked, it's so interesting because I had my dentist friend was telling me about that, and he said, I put this treat on, it's just like the treat. We just said, okay, you can't have that food until, the treat until you have the food. I said, take the treat off, put the treat with everything else so they can eventually do it. Usually the work is the parents have to be comfortable trusting their own body, because that child will naturally work out a balanced state.
Now, our eating habits stay with us, you know, and so when I was a a younger man, and even a boy, I've quickly learned the importance of exercise. And so for me, that was really, really important as part of my life. And it's kind of core to who I am. To marry that, I actually had to learn, what would be good for my body in order to maximize my exercise potential. That has stayed with me, and here I am 54 years old. And so, and I'm still I advocate, and I'm a hiker, I'm a walker, I'm a backpacker, I'm kind of to the extreme. And I recognize how my body responds to different foods. And I say all that to say, as an adult who has maybe grown up with labels on their foods, can that idea that you're talking about now be, and I don't necessarily use the word reprogrammed, but can we have a mind change or a thought change on how we think about food as adults?
You already described, when you said, when you're talking about eating, because you can see I listened very closely to the words, because you said how my body felt. I wanted to choose food how my body felt. You definitely want to be able to access that feeling in your body. So you are within your body, you're not just in your head, because there's so much information beyond food that's in your gut. So you want to be there, but you were already making some decisions based on how you feel, if I'm understanding you right.
That's because, I valued the exercise became really important to me. And so, in high school, I'm an asthmatic by nature. And so I had a really bad asthma attack. So my first go-to for exercise was running. And so we're talking, 40 years ago. And so my first run was 3 seconds. But, over the course of time, I learned to build my endurance. But what I did, just natural to me, was if I'm going to run, I want to make sure that I eat the right foods because I recognize that if I'm on a sugar high, that sugar's going to, and I'm going to not run so much, not run so well. So I had to learn how to balance. And so, eating, and then through my environment, my parents were divorced. And so I actually learned how to cook, so I'm pretty good in the kitchen. So for me to have all these, having access to the kitchen and exercising and then studying, and this is long before the internet. So, magazines on what it meant to be healthy and eating healthy. That became my life, but it wasn't everybody's choice. And so I actually literally had to teach my Mom, we should probably be eating. So I taught her about labels. We should probably be eating, this rather than this. And I'm not going to go into too much detail as what this and that were. But, and for example, chicken. I love chicken, but I learned that chicken is good, chicken skin is bad because chicken skin is where all the fat is, and then chicken skin, the chicken is real, the good stuff is, especially the white meat. It's not laden down with calories and all that kind of, and it's not fat. So I did learn how to choose foods that were right for the body. And then of course I learned how to acquire the taste for those foods because that wasn't always an easy thing to acquire because when real food is really given to you, like from the ground or from, from natural um, sellers, it has a very distinct and clear taste compared to other foods which are not quite as natural.
I would absolutely agree with that. That's why if we can just stay connected, like you kind of learned it along the way, it wasn't somebody telling you. That was what's interesting. I was listening closely. It wasn't your parents telling you what you should and shouldn't eat. It was like the opposite. You were almost going the other direction, but your wisdom stayed. Somehow it wasn't interfered with outside judgment. And that's where it's like you've got that fine-tuned understanding that you want to eat what feels good to you. But if somebody kept stay there as you were little and said, you should eat this, you shouldn't eat that, you better not eat this, you better eat this, how do you even feel what you're feeling that would feel good to you as you ran? So it's that combination of understanding. And the problem is you read the research, but let's say that the research said that shrimp is really healthy and you eat it, but you break out.
Hmm.
Who's the ultimate authority? You are.
Yeah, because I definitely don't want to have any negative impacts from eating something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you are the ultimate authority. So I start with that, with you being the ultimate authority. You learn that from listening to your body. It sounds like you thought, okay, this feels good. This feels better when I eat this. Am I understanding? Is that how you decided what you were going to choose to eat?
I was listening, I'm very in tune. And so over the course of time, I've become more in tune with how my body responds to things. And so food being one of them. And so recognizing that in I wanted to be an endurance athlete, which is funny because I've got asthma, so it's kind of counterintuitive. But what would sustain me the longest in terms of calorie intake? And so it was a learning process, but in all of that, I recognize that when I eat certain foods, my body does quite literally feel good
Yeah.
compared to when I eat other foods. Now, I do like chocolate, and I'll be honest, I do have a sweet tooth, and so I'll eat a donut and or cake. Not, I'm not saying I'm going to go overboard, but my body does understand. But I always tend to think I am not the norm. Uh, and that's quite and that's a reality. I'm not the norm, at least in my own head, that there are other people who struggle with really understanding and appreciating the taste, the value, and the real feeling that food gives them.
Yeah. What was key, what you said is not only is it taste, it's how your body feels. There's your gut brain. We need to engage that gut brain. It's what tastes good, but also what feels good. Like somebody might want to eat chocolate, it tastes really good. And I love that you have that, you choose that, because that's part of eating also is pleasure when we're hungry. And that is really key to understand the pleasure of taste because we need pleasure. We were given five pleasure senses. We just don't use those pleasure senses. We've robbed taste sometimes to handle discomfort in the gut instead of hunger. So the pleasure of taste is part of us, and you've honored that. And you've also honored the gut brain. How does your body feel when I eat these foods?
So we really need to tap into this while we're having this conversation. Gut brain. So, I kind of tapped into it at the beginning of this conversation, but we really need to clarify because it's right here.
Yeah, yeah, it's right
It's
there.
right here. And it tells me a lot. Now, and I mean that to say I know when I get nervous. You talked about butterflies in the stomach, and I know when it's not healthy. It's the first thing that's going to literally tell me that my body is not regular.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of tap in? Well, one, clarify when you say gut brain, what are we talking about? And how do we tap into how can we use it? And I don't want to manipulate my gut brain, but how can we understand our gut brain in order to better experience, I guess, joy in life? Because I think it all starts here. At least that's what I've been told.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. But we can start, and I use the food because hunger is within the gut brain. It's really in the lining of the gut brain, but it's in the gut brain. So I always start people with really feeling hunger. And it's kind of interesting in the society. They want to drug it or ignore it or not feel it or not, it's like, my word, we need to honor hunger. It's the start. That's what I learned from my infant. It's the start of eating. And we want to feel it, we want to understand it, because when we're hungry, our body is telling us we need to eat. Now, you talked about the asthma and the exercise. You were forced to listen to your body. You had to. And you wanted to work with your asthma, which is incredible. I mean, your asthma was a gift that kept you connected to your gut brain.
It did. And so because I didn't want to take for whatever reason, this is just me being the odd person. I didn't want to take medication, and so I was offered that option. And of course, I do carry an emergency inhaler. I think it's downstairs at this point. But for me, it was I wanted to manage my asthma rather than my asthma, really controlling how I lived my life. And so with that, it was kind of my own health journey. Now, I'll go 40 years forward and a couple of years back. I overdid it, and so I kind of changed my exercise and my eating routines. Because by nature I'm small. I'm 5'6" and at best 145 pounds, and so not very intimidating. But I like to strength train, and so what I wanted to do was kind of just bulk. Not a good idea. And I say that because I was consuming, and this was, my heart attack was 2022, so October 2022. That whole year, I was kind of bulking up and eating a lot more proteins, especially milk and whey. And long story short, blood pressure went up. Kidneys were not doing well based on blood tests. And so not listening to what and even bulking up for me was putting my body at discomfort, and that's actually key. Because what you see in front of you, this scrawny little guy who's got some muscular, is a comfortable frame for me, and it's a comfortable weight for me, and it's a comfortable everything for me. When I get bigger, it's not necessarily, it looks good as a man, it looks good, but it's not comfortable. My body recognizes that it's different. And I say all that to say, eventually I did have the heart attack. And so from that moment forward, my exercise changed drastically again. So I'm more aerobic in there rather than weight train, but I still weight train. And my eating, of course, is completely different, back to what it was when I was in high school, more fruits, vegetables, grains, and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes I listen to my body, and sometimes my ego gets in the way, and I did my own thing. But I learned the hard way because that heart attack could have taken me out. Now I may be the lucky one that I'm giving another opportunity to do the things right and do things the right way. So what you're saying is absolutely, gold for me, because when I do listen to my gut brain, it actually tells me the truth.
Yeah, it's very truth-based. There's a lot of wisdom, but you said two very important things. You said you all of a sudden wanted an image which felt uncomfortable to you. You said there was discomfort. That's your body saying, stop,
I
stop.
wasn't listening.
You weren't listening. It's you stopped listening. That's how we disconnected. We stopped listening. So your body was trying to give you these messages as little signs of discomfort, and you kept building. And all of a sudden, bam, it's screaming at you. Stop the heart attack. Stop. It has so much wisdom. And you now have noticed the difference between listening to your body and not listening to your body. So you wonder how eating that was supposed to be so simple and so life-giving and so energy-giving becomes so complex. It's because we stop listening.
Before this call, you mentioned the word joy. You're a coach. And so you're what, and I just want to tease this a little bit because you're going to come back on Coach's Corner. What kind of coach are you, real quick? What do you coach on?
I basically teach people how to resurface their natural eating boundaries and reconnect to their wisdom of their body, to their own wisdom. And that's basically the whole process that I teach. I take out the interference. It's like I don't put it's not my program or a plan I put on top of somebody. It's a process that guides them to remove the interference so your natural boundaries can surface. We all own them because we were all an infant at some point in time. And within that, what they start to discover is that feeling of energy giving, like being in your body that you love being in, like when you describe the difference between when you tried to change what your natural body was, it didn't feel so good. It doesn't feel good to have extra storage. That's my term for fat, because to me, it's always stored information. There's so much information in that. We're not meant to have it because that's for a famine. I mean, that's what storage is for. It's for a famine. And I haven't heard of one coming yet. So we don't need to store up. And now we have refrigeration. We don't need to store in our body at all. And it just doesn't feel good to have that extra storage. So when somebody works with me, they lose the storage. But more important, they start developing tools on how to handle their life with their own thoughts and actions without robbing the taste of food. So that's how we connect to hunger. Because when you're not hungry, you don't need to eat. And if you have storage, like I work with people, when they have storage, they need to be comfortable with hunger so we can use up the storage because there's energy in the storage. And what happens then beyond that is that serotonin, there's 90% of that feel-good hormone is in your gut brain. That starts to surface. That's within all of us. Feeling good being you. Feeling good being within your body. Feeling good being connected to life. The joy of living.
The joy of living. I love that. And so, with the amount of time that we have left, I want you to give something to our audience, give something to our people, the people who are watching and listening, to kind of reconnect. Please reconnect with their
Yeah.
gut brain because you're coming back on Coach's Corner. We need to figure out how this works professionally. But until we do that, how can you help people reconnect with their gut brain?
I give them three little tools. They're very easy. Just so we become very, very aware when we start eating and when we stop eating. We need that awareness. We need that concrete awareness. So the first thing I tell people is before you put one nibble in your mouth, sit, because you know you are sitting. You are aware that you are sitting. And that also engages the gut brain because the food has been fused with kind of life. So we need to separate it out and really pay attention and have a very concrete awareness when we're starting to eat and when we're stopping. And of course, the first thing when I say that, people would just say, but I don't have time to just sit and eat. And and I say, if you could take all the time and energy that you spent worrying about eating, what you're not eating, the clothes change of sizes, you got to buy different clothes, whatever, you take all that time, energy, and money, and you put it on a shelf, would you have more time to simply sit and eat?
Hmm.
So that's the first thing I have people do, to stop, to truly use that food, to taste it, and really honor that you are going to feed yourself. That food is going into you and you alone. Take that time just for you. That's the first thing that I do. Second thing is, and this is really difficult because people are multitasking and doing everything else, you don't do anything else while you're eating. Because how can you possibly really feel? Because if you're doing something else, you've got to pay attention to what you're doing. You can't really feel what the food is doing for you. And you feel what you feel like in terms of your quantity. And people say, okay, so I just sit and then I eat. And then once you're finished, you stand. And then once you go into life, whatever you're resting or doing your whole life, anytime a desire to eat comes up, I always call it the desire to eat thought when you're not hungry. That's where we have a lot more tools to handle any discomfort that is happening within your body, any feeling of being stuck. People call it boredom. Well, what's boredom? It's just you haven't made a decision what you're going to do yet. So we develop a ton of tools how, when you are not hungry, what do you do with that time? And I'll just give you a quick little story. I worked with a man, he was the CEO of a company, and he understood kind of, okay, you eat when you're hungry, you don't, you sit, when you stand up, you don't eat anything else until you're hungry again. And then you sit. And he said, but Shirley, he said, I get that. But 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I want to eat. And I check with my stomach and I'm not hungry. And I still have this magnetism to eat. And 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I said, okay, for just this moment in time, let's just say eating didn't exist. What would you do in that 2 o'clock time? And he thought, and he thought, and he said, I'm a CEO of a company. I don't have any answers. I feel like I have a camp on that says, I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea. I said, exactly. Because once you use food when you're not hungry, you have used food instead of your own creative mind to think about what you're going to do in that moment in time. So we've got to surface that creative wisdom, the creative mind, your thoughts, your actions, what you feel like you could do. We have 4 other pleasure senses. We can watch a movie, we can do whatever. I said, so now we're going to try this again. Put the eating aside and let's start brainstorming. What could you possibly do? All of a sudden, he starts thinking of things. All of a sudden, he said, well, I could walk down the hall. I could look out the window. I could call somebody. I said, yes, there's unlimited things you could do at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And when we started this conversation, I said, you had no idea, but there's unlimited things. And now you see when eating is out of order, what it does to the creative mind. That's the key. So those are 3 things that are really key. Sit, don't do anything else, but while you're eating, really taste the food. Really taste it. What does it taste like? And some people would say, oh my word, I remember sitting, because I would always grab a banana after I ran. I'd grab it and then eat while I was going someplace else. And all of a sudden, no, I got to sit. And all of a sudden I'm eating this banana. And my client said, oh my word, I'd never really tasted a banana before until I'd really stopped my movement and paid attention to the taste.
Wow. Shirley, I enjoyed our time together. This has been a great conversation on the Question God podcast. You are coming back to
I
Coach's Corner?
I love your stories. I love how you got to where you had to listen and then you didn't, and what it felt like. I mean, you were just like the perfect example of when we stop listening, what happens.
Well, for those of you who have been watching and listening, I'll see you next time. Take care.